Hello, and welcome to another Roofing Economic Outlook. My name is Heidi Ellsworth, and I'm the president of Roofers Coffee Shop. And I am very honored to be here with Mischa Fisher, the chief economist for Angi. Mischa, thank you for being here again on the Roofing Economic Outlook.
This is fun. We've got a real routine down now.
I know. And I look forward to this so much because there's so many questions out there right now. There's so much going on, not only just in the world, in our country, but definitely in the economy.
There is. Yeah, it's the constant of economics. There's always going to be something going on. So yeah, we certainly have a lot going on this month.
Lumber prices just fell a little bit, not a whole lot, but we're seeing it, and existing home sales showed a slowdown in April. How do you see that affecting the home improvement market?
It's interesting. So they are down. They're at a more or less 2022 low, but the key word there is 2022. Yeah. So if you look at the prices right now for lumber, it's in the commodity prices around $600 per thousand board feet. And that's a drop from what we saw at the height of COVID, where it was 3 times that. But if you look back over the last decade, it's still roughly double what the pre-COVID price was. So I think we are hitting a stage where we do see more normalcy. Right now, what we need is more stability so that overall supply chain can get back to behaving like it normally behaves, right? You don't want your lumber mills not having a good idea of how to staff up. You don't want big backlogs and then big shortages in lumber yards. So we want to get to a point where it's behaving as it's supposed to, where lumber mills can predict how they have to schedule and produce, where yards have a realistic sense of what their inventory is doing, and where we know that if we go into the home store, we're not going to be faced with 2x4s that are ranging from $4 to $12 in any given week. So yeah. I do think we are getting back to that point where it'll be more normal. In terms of pricing, home improvement, we don't tend to use quite as much lumber as in new home construction. So as new home construction also sort of pares back a little bit as interest rates go up, I think that should allow people to save a little bit more on the cost of those things.
Yeah, and I mean, we're in the middle of a home remodel right now, and it is nice to see it coming down a little bit, but you're right, it's not anything like pre-COVID. And I'm also really interested, I mean, I just want to play off what you just said too, with the interest rates going up, there's still a major housing shortage. I mean, at least that's what we see in our area, and I think we're seeing it everywhere. How do you see that kind of balancing out?
The thing about interest rates going up right now is it has made buying a house a lot more expensive. But like you said, we still have a shortage of where people want to live and the number of houses there. And if you look at the overall price of a house, it's still not at an all-time high. It is now at about a 30-year high. So they are getting pretty expensive. And so we should expect sales to slow down. But I don't think we're going to see them drop to, zero. We're not facing the Great Recession here again, because the people who are in their homes have a lot of home equity in those homes and have cheap mortgages on them, right? Mm-hmm, if you've got a 2.9 or 3% mortgage and inflation is 8%, that's a pretty good deal for you in terms of your mortgage cost. Inflation's painful in other areas, but not in the fact that it's making your mortgage effectively cheaper. So I don't think we're going to see it come back down to zero, but I think we will see it certainly slow down, maybe to 1 million new homes per year rather than the 1.5 that we're at right now. Before the Great Recession, we were building almost 2 million new homes per year, and it doesn't look like we're getting back to that anytime soon. And that's what it would kind of have to be at to actually meet the demand that demographics is pushing for, because we just don't have enough homes in the South and Southwest and the Mountain West where people have been moving.
One person will talk, the world's ending, big recession. Other people are like, no, just a little softening. Kind of, what are some of the things you're seeing for them?
Yeah, so there is this debate over whether or not we're going to have a recession. This has been a big topic of discussion. And the main thing I would keep in mind is that what the Fed is trying to do, they've never successfully done before. So the track record is not great. But if you look at some of the other fundamentals, maybe they could this time, because there is so much health in consumer spending, in household wealth. The labor markets are still really tight. We still don't have all of the jobs back from before COVID. So what I'm looking at right now to determine that is, one, watch foreclosure rates, especially for our industry. If foreclosure rates actually start going up, then that could be concerning, right? But right now they're at a more or less an all-time low. So they're very, very low in terms of people being kicked out of their homes. And I think the reason why is that everybody who's been buying homes can really afford them, and they've bought them with a lot of equity, and they've got cheap mortgages. The other thing I would watch is initial unemployment claims. We get that data every week. And in a normal month, you've got people filing about 200,000 unemployment claims across the country. So watch for that to tick up in case it does. But right now, so far, it hasn't really gone up. And then the final thing is see what happens with home prices. So home prices, we have new data out this week on home price. It's still 20% year over year increases. It is lagged a little bit. So they're still pulling data in to get this month's increase from sales that happened in February and March before interest rates went really, really high. Right now, you would expect inflation to serve as kind of a floor. So if inflation is 8%, home prices should increase by at least 8% as a floor. They're still at 20%. If home prices drop down below that, where we're seeing the year over year gain as 4% in home prices and inflation's 8%, then homes are losing their value proportionally. So I would view that as a red flag. But so far, that hasn't happened. So across all three of those metrics, so far, there's not a big red flag, and certainly not something that would concern our industry, because right now it's in a much stronger position. People still feel really burned from the last recession because it was a housing recession and because it hit new home construction and remodeling pretty heavy.
Right.
That doesn't, if we do have a recession, I don't think it's going to be concentrated in housing. I think it's going to be concentrated in other areas, and that we would weather it pretty well.
In watching the contractors and hearing what they're saying about their backlogs and about the demand and people trying to find, I just talked to somebody the other day trying to find an electrician who was 6 months out. So it seems like there's still just this enormous unmet demand for the home improvement area.
There is. And that lag isn't necessarily healthy. What I keep telling people is raise your prices so that you can serve customers sooner, because I think people are still a little bit concerned from the last recession where they say it's better to have the guaranteed work than to have a smaller pipeline with higher prices. I'm not sure that that's the right move. I think you should be very comfortable raising your prices so that you can serve clients sooner and get those jobs done, and then just adjust your prices as those market conditions dictate, rather than being a talented home pro and telling people they got to wait for 6 to 24 months, which is very, very common. You hear that all the time, but that's just not a way for a healthy market to function. I think it would be a lot better if people were able to meet that demand sooner.
Gas prices is affecting transportation, obviously, in the products, oil with asphalt and everything else. So what are you kind of seeing on that front?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily count on them going down anytime soon. I just did a road trip last week, and that was painful. Filling the tank on that road trip, driving across the Mountain West. It was pretty painful, but I'm not counting on that to come down. I don't know that we'll see it go that much higher, but I think that they'll remain elevated for the time being because we can only produce so much, and that doesn't change very quickly. The sentiment among drillers isn't great, so they're not throwing a lot of investment at bringing new wells online. The war in Europe is not helping anything on that front, and we'll see how the sanctions regime changes that right now in terms of how much Russian oil makes it to market. And, we've still got large portions of the global economy still coming online and demanding more petroleum. So I wish I had better news to give, but I'm not expecting a lot of relief there. I don't think we're coming back down to, $2.50 a gallon gasoline anytime soon.
No. Yeah. And that's hard. That's hard for the contractors who are out in their trucks. They're going to jobs. They have service crews going everywhere. And so it's a big part of their budget, and important to watch that bottom line.
It is. They've got to watch the bottom line. And what a lot of people have done to, in many cases, great success, is adding a clear surcharge for consumers to see, saying, I'm not just unilaterally raising my price, but as long as gas is $5 a gallon, this is my gas surcharge for driving around. And if you build that in there, maybe you can get more efficient use of it. And this also does sort of increase the importance of really smart planning on your part if you're running a business, in terms of routing and trip planning, and not needlessly being inefficient in your usage of the stuff, because as it gets more expensive, it becomes certainly an incentive to conserve it as best you can.
We're seeing some things coming out on the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. It was passed by Congress and signed by the president. How do you expect material cost relief in the coming month to is there any help in that on that front?
I'll give you a two-part answer. Yes, I think materials prices are coming down. I don't necessarily think it's going to be because of federal legislation. I spent a long time working in DC, and things don't work that quickly in terms of when something gets passed, how quickly it translates to improvements in the market. What I will say, though, is that we've already seen inflation in construction materials come down pretty considerably. The inflation rate was approaching 40%. It was about 35% for much of the spring. It's now come down to about half of that. So it's still pretty high. It's still much higher than general consumer prices in terms of inflation. But I do think that if you look at the trend, we should see a reversion to its norm rate of about 5%. It's still 3 times that right now. But if you look at the trajectory, it's coming straight down. So I do think that we are going to see some improvement on that front.
And it's interesting. We've had a recent manufacturer in the metal area who put out information. It was actually Metal Era who put out information about a 12% price relief decrease to help the contractors. And so there are some people out there who seem to be seeing some softening in pricing. It's interesting. They really took a strong marketing approach to that, which I thought was really smart for them to kind of take a lead on that. But what are some of your thoughts on the pricings of materials coming down and being reflected back to the contractors?
I think that that's an ingenious move on their part to do that because everybody's aware of it right now. And if you're a manufacturer and you're pretty closely tied into those commodity markets, and you can come up with a strategy to hedge those prices and then pass those savings on to your customers, that's great. I do think that for the contractor, it does speak to the importance of making sure you have a really, really diverse pipeline as best you can of different places to shop around for those materials, because in a normal, boring, stable market, everybody's going to be kind of like, around the same. But right now you might actually find a big gap in terms of what people can offer. And I think that speaks to the importance of making sure you have a diverse pipeline if you can.
And it seems like that diverse pipeline is also going to start causing overall the market to start bringing some of the pricing down. I mean, as people start making some of those moves and contractors are looking in different areas and buying from different areas, that's going to start affecting things, don't you think?
I think it will. Right now, if you are in this business, you've got to be pretty aware of what's going on and you've got to be protecting that bottom line. And that's a pretty powerful behavioral driver. And so I think that for anybody who's listening and is going through this process, you are already shopping around and thinking about how do you get a better deal? How do you raise prices as best you can and then protect your input costs as best you can? And yeah, I think that does certainly serve as a downward pressure on it because people, we don't like to pay more.
What are some of the top things that contractors should be thinking of right now around the economy?
I think that they should be protecting their margins. Number one, that is really, really big. We've talked about this before about how, there was a flooring manufacturer that had to file for bankruptcy a month ago. And the fact that they're doing great volume because it's a booming industry doesn't do you any good if you're losing on margins. So make sure you're protecting your margins in a highly inflationary environment, especially with high volatility in materials prices. The second thing is have that diverse demand pipeline as well. And if there is weakening of demand in one sector, make sure that you've got a diverse pipeline for demand, that you've got multiple sources of it. You're not just relying on your single sort of word of mouth to do it. Make sure you've got that diverse demand pipeline. And then the third thing is make sure you really are shopping around the materials because you saw with this manufacturer that knocked prices down 12% and was advertising it. That's an amazing deal when prices are still roughly 15% higher for manufacturers and construction materials. One knocking it down by 12%, that's pretty huge. And so obviously if you were in the metal roofing business and you're not shopping around and you miss that deal, that's going to cost you a lot. So make sure you really, really have that, those three. So protect your margins, have a diverse demand pipeline, and shop around on materials. I think are the big three things this month certainly to be doing.
Smart. That's a great takeaway. I love that. Mischa, thank you again. Great. I mean, I'm going to go back and listen to this. There's so many great takeaways from this roofing economic outlook. So thank you so much for being here today. And I can't wait for our next one.
This was fun. Great questions as always, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. I hope you will listen to this a couple times and take notes across all the board. This is great feedback, great things to help your business. And of course, it's all brought to you by Angi. And we will continue to bring this. We'll be meeting again, Mischa, in about 5 weeks.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you. All have a great day. And we'll see you next time on the Roofing Economic Outlook.